The sun was just beginning to dip behind the distant hills as we pulled into our new driveway. After months of searching, negotiating, and packing, we had finally arrived at what we hoped would be our forever home. The house stood proudly on a quiet cul-de-sac, flanked by a manicured lawn and an old oak tree that shaded the front porch. It was peaceful, serene, exactly the kind of place my parents dreamed of retiring in, and my siblings and I were excited for a fresh start. My grandfather, a retired general with a steely gaze and an aura of quiet authority, sat beside me in the passenger seat. He looked around the neighborhood, noting every detail with military precision. "Seems quiet," he said, his voice calm but firm, the way only men who've commanded battalions can speak. My dad chuckled from the driver's seat. "Exactly what we were looking for, Dad. No drama, no noise, just peace." We all laughed, thinking those words would age well. None of us could have predicted what would happen less than an hour later. Trouble, it turned out, wasn't something you could screen for during a real estate tour. And in our case, it came wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. But in that golden hour moment, we were still blissfully unaware. We were just a family moving into our dream home with no clue a storm named Karen was already brewing. We began unloading boxes from the moving truck, grateful for the cool breeze that cut through the late summer heat. Neighbors peeked out of their windows but didn't approach. A few waved from across the street, and we smiled and waved back, hopeful this would be a welcoming community. Grandpa carried 2 heavy boxes like they were feathers and placed them gently inside the entryway. That's when she arrived, her heels clicking on the pavement like warning shots. She was in her 50s with perfectly styled hair, large sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of authority. Her name tag read Diane. But the neighborhood would come to know her by another name, HOA Karen. She marched up our driveway like she owned it, completely ignoring our greetings. "I'm here to welcome you," she said, as if reading from a script, "and to inform you that you need to sign the HOA agreement immediately." My dad blinked. "I'm sorry, what agreement?" Karen smiled tightly, the kind of smile that hides irritation behind fake pleasantries. "The Homeowners Association contract. This entire street is under HOA jurisdiction." Grandpa stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Funny we didn't see any mention of that in the closing documents," he said. Karen stiffened. "Well, it's mandatory. Everyone here signs. It's how we maintain order." I remember the silence that followed like a thunderclap, dense and thick with disbelief. My mother frowned and glanced at my father. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the digital documents. "There's no HOA listed in our deed or property disclosure," he said, baffled. Karen didn't miss a beat. "Sometimes it's not listed, but trust me, it's there." Grandpa's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly, a sign we all knew meant he smelled a lie. "Trust you? That's a bold request." Karen's expression faltered, but only for a moment, recovered quickly, clearing her throat and adjusting her sunglasses. "If you refuse to sign, I'll have to escalate this." My little sister, watching from the steps, whispered, "Is she serious?" Grandpa turned toward Karen slowly. "Ma'am, you're on private property. We haven't agreed to anything, nor are we obligated to, without legal proof." Karen's lips parted, but nothing came out. After a long beat, she snapped, "Fine. Have it your way. Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, she pivoted on. Her heel and stormed back down the driveway, her clipboard swinging like a weapon. We all stood there in stunned silence. Dad looked at Grandpa. "You think she'd actually escalate it?" Grandpa's gaze didn't waver from the street. "She just might. Entitlement is a powerful motivator." We resumed unloading the truck, but the air had shifted. That sense of serenity we felt pulling into the driveway was gone, replaced by tension that crackled under the surface. "She can't force us into an HOA, right?" I asked. Dad shook his head. "Not legally, but people like her don't play by the book. They bluff, intimidate, and hope you cave." Grandpa remained quiet, watching the street as if expecting an ambush. An hour later, as we set up folding chairs in the living room, we heard the sirens. Not loud, but unmistakable. A police cruiser pulled up right in front of our house. Karen stood on the sidewalk, gesturing animatedly to the officers. My stomach dropped. She called the cops on us for not signing her HOA paper. My mom looked toward Grandpa, who stood and headed for the door without a word. The officer stepped out, adjusting his belt, trying to look both authoritative and approachable. Karen intercepted him immediately, pointing at our house and speaking rapidly. We couldn't hear the words, but her tone was all too familiar, accusatory, smug, certain of victory. Grandpa waited until the officer approached our walkway before stepping onto the porch. "Good evening, officer. Something I can help you with?" The officer glanced at Grandpa, then at Karen. "We received a call about a disturbance involving a homeowners association dispute." Grandpa nodded. "Disturbance, huh? Interesting choice of words." Karen interrupted, waving her clipboard. "They're refusing to comply with HOA rules. They're violating community guidelines by moving in without signing the agreement." The officer scratched his head. "Is there a recorded HOA covenant on file?" Karen faltered. "Well, it's implied. Everyone follows it. That's how we do things here." Grandpa crossed his arms. "Implied law doesn't hold much weight, officer, especially when it contradicts actual property rights." The officer turned to my dad. "You have any documents regarding your property? Purchase?" Dad stepped inside and returned with the deed. The officer examined it, nodded slowly, and handed it back. "Sir, there's no HOA listed here," he said. "Without a recorded agreement, I can't enforce anything." Karen's face turned a shade of red that could power a lighthouse. "They're ruining the neighborhood," she cried. Grandpa stepped forward. "Ma'am, unless you have legal documentation, you're the one causing the disturbance, not us." Officer raised a hand. "Everyone, let's keep things civil." Karen huffed and turned away, muttering under her breath. The officer nodded politely and returned to his vehicle. Grandpa remained still until the cruiser disappeared down the street. Only then did he turn to us. "She's not done," he said. "People like that rarely walk away after a failed power play." I didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. As night fell, we locked the doors and double-checked the windows. Our new home no longer felt like a haven, it felt like enemy territory. Mom tried to lighten the mood with pizza and jokes, but tension hung in the air like fog. Grandpa sat near the front window, eyes sharp, posture rigid. "I've seen smaller battles escalate into wars," he murmured. We all went to bed uneasily that night. My younger siblings clung to their blankets, and I could hear Dad pacing down the hallway. Even the house creaked as if it, too, was unsettled. But Grandpa didn't sleep. I saw the glow of the porch light reflecting off his silhouette, a sentinel in the dark, waiting for the next move. Whatever Karen had planned next, she wasn't ready for him. Not even close. Karen's house went up for sale within the week, and the neighborhood watched with bated breath. There were no goodbyes, no farewells, just a moving truck and cold stares from windows. Even the for sale sign looked embarrassed. To be there, the real estate agent didn't linger, nor did anyone offer to help. When she left, she took her clipboard and chaos with her. It should have been the end of it, the final page of an unpleasant chapter. But wounds in a neighborhood take time to heal, especially ones inflicted by fear and manipulation. For many residents, Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a symbol of control. And symbols don't vanish with a moving van. They echo, sometimes louder than before. Grandpa stood on the porch with arms folded, eyes scanning the street like a seasoned commander. "One tyrant gone," he muttered. "Let's hope no one steps into her boots." Why, he wasn't being dramatic, he was being prepared. Karen's tactics had left an imprint, a blueprint for others. And we'd be fools to think the threat vanished with her. For a time, the street felt alive again. Families returned to their routines, kids played freely, and neighbors actually smiled when they passed each other. We held a small gathering to celebrate the vote, just a few folding chairs, snacks, and laughter. Grandpa grilled hot dogs while telling old army stories that somehow made everyone feel safe. It was the calm we'd craved. Mrs. Chen brought lemon bars. The Petersons came with sparkling cider, and Mr. Diaz showed up for the first time in months. He didn't say much, just nodded and quietly ate beside Grandpa. "Sometimes showing up is enough," Grandpa said later. The event felt like a restart, a second first impression. But peace, as we learned, is always temporary. The first sign was subtle. A flyer left on our doorstep with no signature or group name. It was printed on expensive paper and titled Maintaining Community Standards. The language was vague. Words like order, expectations, and shared vision were peppered throughout. There were no demands, but it read like a warning. Grandpa scanned it and grunted. "These are test balloons," he said. "They want to see who bites." Sure enough, similar flyers appeared on other porches within days.
Us.
Some people tossed them. Others seemed curious.
That.
A few even posted questions in the local Facebook group. Who's behind this? Is this the old HOA resurfacing? We watched the responses closely. The fear had not fully left. Dad went door to door again, not campaigning, just checking in. "Just neighbors being neighbors," he said, smiling. People were more open now, but cautious. "It's probably nothing," Mrs. Chen whispered. But, you never know. That uncertainty was all the instigators needed. Doubt is fertilizer for control. Grandpa called it the first crack in the wall. One evening, a man in a navy blazer came to our door. He had a professional smile and the kind of voice you hear in boardrooms. "We're conducting a survey," he said, "to improve neighborhood harmony." Grandpa asked to see his credentials. He had none. "Who sent you?" Grandpa asked. "Just concerned residents," the man replied. He didn't stay long. Next week, we received another letter, this time with an official-looking header. Brookside Council for Neighborhood Integrity. "Catchy," Mom said sarcastically. It wasn't signed by anyone specific. It outlined a proposal to ensure uniform standards and restore order and accountability. It reeked of Karen's legacy, though the tone was more polished. But the message was the same. "They've gone underground," Grandpa said. "Same mission, different faces." We started compiling every flyer, letter, and email in a binder labeled New HOA Watch. It felt ridiculous, but necessary. "You win by being prepared," Grandpa said, even when they wear smiles instead of scowls. That binder grew thicker by the day. Mr. Diaz came by one night with a solemn expression. "They offered me a seat on their advisory board," he said. "Told me it's just symbolic, nothing official." He declined. But he wasn't the only one. Other neighbors quietly admitted similar offers. They were trying to recruit from within, divide us again. Grandpa frowned deeply. Insurgency. In response, we hosted a second community night open to all. No agenda, no politics. Just food, music, and face-to-face time. The turnout was even bigger than the first. The laughter was louder, the stories more personal, and the trust a little stronger. Grandpa gave a toast to neighbors, not rulers. People clapped and raised their glasses. For a few weeks, the effort seemed to stall. No new flyers, no more visits. We thought we'd won again. That's when the anonymous complaints began. Overgrown grass, unapproved paint colors, parking, violations. Code enforcement came by twice, found nothing wrong, and apologized. "Someone's trying to use the system," the officer said. But we've seen worse. Even with no violations, the stress crept back in. Every knock on the door made us brace. Every car that lingered on the street made us suspicious. We weren't paranoid, we were aware. They were trying to wear us down, Grandpa said. Victory through attrition. Oh, but they underestimated his stamina and his memory. He kept meticulous notes. One day, Grandpa mailed a certified letter. To every household, it was short and firm. No HOA exists in this community. No committee has authority. Any attempt to impose control without consent will be challenged legally. This is your formal notice. It landed like thunder. For many, it was a relief. For others, a warning. But it was necessary. That same week, Grandpa filed paperwork with the city, a declaration of 9 HOA status for our property, and a request for formal recognition. It didn't create anything new, but it clarified our legal position. No one could claim ignorance anymore. They want structure, Grandpa said. We'll give them law. It was the smartest move yet. We started getting thank you cards. Literal, handwritten thank you notes from neighbors we'd barely spoken to. One simply read, "Thank you for standing up." Another, "You made me feel safe in my own home again." It was powerful, humbling. Grandpa pinned each one to the corkboard by the front door. Proof that quiet resistance matters, he said. But the opposition wasn't finished. A petition appeared and signed again calling for reform and voluntary unity. It was careful not to use the word HOA, but its intent was obvious. We countered with our own document, a community bill of rights. Freedom from forced associations. Freedom from surveillance. Freedom to live in peace. People signed it publicly. The contrast was clear. One group worked in shadows. The other stood in the light. At the next community meeting, attendance tripled. This time, we invited a local attorney to speak. She confirmed everything Grandpa had said. Without unanimous consent, she explained, no binding rules can be enforced. Retaliation can be prosecuted. Her words were met with applause. The man in the navy blazer returned once more, this time not so confident. He handed Grandpa a final letter and offer to cease all formal efforts in exchange for amicable coexistence. Grandpa smiled. There's nothing to cease. There never was. Just people pretending to hold power. The man left without another word. We never saw him again. Things began to settle after that. The energy shifted. There were no more flyers. No more secret meetings. It's just families planting flowers, kids riding scooters, and parents waving to each other at dusk. We'd earned it not through aggression, but through resolve. Karen was gone. Her ghost faded. And Grandpa finally started sleeping in. He still patrolled occasionally, more out of habit than necessity. But now he did it with a coffee cup instead of a clipboard. I joined him sometimes, just for the stories. He never gloated, never bragged. This wasn't about winning, he told me once. It was about reminding people they had a choice. We had chosen peace. The bench under the oak tree became his favorite spot. He'd sit with a paperback in hand, boots on the grass, watching the neighborhood breathe. Dogs barked, sprinklers hissed, and the sound of lawnmowers hummed in harmony. No HOA, no fear. Just neighbors living their lives, freely and together. The summer air hung heavy, but it wasn't the heat that unsettled us. There was a calm now, but it felt too perfect, like the quiet before a second storm. Even Grandpa, who now spent his mornings tending the roses, occasionally paused to look over his shoulder. Stillness isn't always peace, he murmured. The past had taught us that silence could be strategic, despite our victories. Unease still lingered in certain corners of the neighborhood. Some families kept their distance, never attending gatherings or waving from driveways. They weren't hostile, just ... removed. We couldn't tell if it was caution or loyalty to the fallen regime. Grandpa watched them closely, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Rumors began drifting like smoke. Someone had been speaking to a lawyer, not one of ours. A new name, Surface Lance Burnham, consultant who specialized in community governance. He wasn't local, but he'd been seen entering the old community center on Maple Street. No one knew who invited him. But Grandpa had a guess. That's the new front, he said. They're trying legitimacy now. Burnham had credentials. A LinkedIn profile full of buzzwords and pictures shaking hands with local officials. It all screamed polished persuasion, but to Grandpa, it screamed manipulation wrapped in civility. Karen tried control through force. This one will try it through contracts. Dad and I drove by the community center the next weekend. Sure enough, the parking lot was full. Flyers stapled to a wooden post read, "Open Forum on Neighborhood Advancement." Beneath smaller text, led by consultant Lance Burnham. We didn't go in. We didn't need to. Strategy was clear. Disguise a meeting, bait with promises. The forum triggered another wave of uncertainty. A few neighbors asked questions. Is this official? Is this connected to the old HOA? Should we attend? Grandpa's advice was simple. You have the right to listen. But don't sign anything, not a pen stroke. That line became a mantra for many, and it worked. Caution beat curiosity. Burnham, however, wasn't deterred. He began mailing personalized letters, ones that referenced each house by address, tailored with soft flattery. Your beautiful lawn reflects the pride of Brookside. Your home embodies our shared values. It was corporate seduction, Grandpa rolled his eyes. He's selling shackles and calling them bracelets. A few residents fell for it. Not because they wanted control, but because they wanted calm. He says it'll reduce property taxes, one neighbor argued. He says, we'll have a voice. The promises were tempting, but we'd seen the fine print before. Grandpa kept every copy that landed in our mailbox, highlighting the key phrases in red, voluntary charter with binding recommendations. He read aloud. That's legal camouflage. He underlined phrases like revocable consent and community voting board. They sounded harmless, but under scrutiny, they weren't. You don't give up freedom for convenience, Grandpa warned. Not even in a cul-de-sac. We decided to act, not just react. Grandpa drafted a community education packet. It included plain language explanations of homeowner rights, sample predatory clauses, and a list of questions to ask any self-proclaimed authority. We handed them out door to door. Dad even translated them into Spanish for the Diaz family. Information became our shield. Burnham responded with charm. He went on local radio. He posted videos online, standing in front of homes he had no connection to. Brookside deserves better, he said in one. Brookside deserves structure. It was always about what we deserved. But Grandpa asked the real question. Who gets to define what we deserve? It was Mrs. Chen who uncovered the first crack in Burnham's veneer. Her niece worked in records at City Hall. She found a request filed under Burnham's name for a Neighborhood Advisory Recognition Certificate, a form used when groups seek semi-official status. It wasn't binding law, but it was a step toward it that changed everything. We printed the form and attached it to every door in the neighborhood. Highlighted in bold, filed without community consent. The reaction was swift. Even those who were curious about Burnham now backed away. He moved too fast, one neighbor said. It's a slick, said another. Suddenly the polished suit started to feel like a mask. Grandpa hosted a third meeting, this time inside our garage, folding chairs packed wall to wall. The theme wasn't resistance, it was vigilance. We don't fight shadows, he said. Shine light so they disappear. He ended with a phrase that stuck with everyone. Govern yourselves before someone else tries to do it for you. That night, someone egged our mailbox. It wasn't major damage, but it was petty, loud, and deliberate. That's desperation, Grandpa said, cleaning it up with quiet hands. He didn't get angry. He just added a note to his logbook. When control slips from people's hands, they throw things, he said, because they're used to having power, not earning it. Burnham held one final meeting, but this time, barely anyone came. A few of his early followers sat scattered among empty chairs. His speech was shorter, his words less confident, and there were no new flyers afterward, just silence. The next day, his website was taken down. Within a week, his name stopped circulating. Just like that, he faded. But even a defeated idea leaves seeds. We knew this wasn't over, not forever. There would always be someone who believed rules were more important than relationships. Someone who mistook order for community. Grandpa made peace with that. You don't win by eliminating opposition, he said. We win by making them unnecessary. We turned our energy inward. Monthly potlucks became a tradition. Kids organized a bike parade. The community center hosted a trivia night that packed the room. There were no presidents, no boards, no fees. Just people sharing space. We didn't need structure. We needed connection. And that was something no outsider could sell. Mom started a newsletter called Brookside Bulletin, shared birthdays, recipes, and neighbor spotlights. Grandpa had a column called Porch Notes, where he shared memories, tips, and occasional grumbles about squirrels. It was lighthearted but grounded. Stories bind us, he said, more than rules ever could. The bulletin became a household staple. Fall arrived with crisp mornings and the smell of wood smoke. Leaves turned and scattered across lawns. The neighborhood breathed in the change and exhaled peace. Burnham was gone. Karen was a distant echo. And what remained was stronger than either of them. We had endured. And not by force, but by choice. One evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, Grandpa said something I'll never forget. Communities aren't built by fear or rules, he said. They're built by people showing up. I nodded, not quite understanding. But I do now. Every cookout, every handshake, every defense of our right sit was all showing up, again and again. Grandpa slowed down that winter, not dramatically, just enough to notice. He still patrolled, but less frequently. Still offered advice, but let others speak more. The torch was passing, not out of necessity, but by design. Every leader trains their replacement, he said, even in neighborhoods. I didn't know he meant me yet. I began organizing the potlucks, started responding to questions in the Facebook group, helped rewrite the community resource packet with clearer language. I didn't mean to lead, but people began looking my way when things got confusing. Grandpa noticed. He smiled one day and handed me his old notebook. It's your turn to fill this. I didn't try to copy him. I just paid attention. When a new couple moved in, I brought cookies. When someone's fence fell, I helped fix it. When flyers appeared from a landscaping company asking for maintenance approval, I followed up to make sure they weren't planting false authority. It wasn't heroic. It was neighborly. That was enough. By spring, the bench under the oak tree had new carvings, hearts, initials, peace signs. Grandpa didn't mind. Proof people are living, he said. We planted daffodils nearby and they bloomed like tiny yellow suns. A new family bought Karen's old house. We welcomed them with lemonade and laughter. No mention of the past. It's just beginnings. There were no more shadows. Not that we could see. But we didn't stop being ready. Grandpa always said vigilance was a quiet form of love. I think he was right, because what we protected wasn't just a neighborhood. It was the right to call it home. And that, above all else, was worth standing for. The sky was overcast the day Grandpa went into the hospital. It wasn't dramatic, just a checkup that turned into a precaution. But it shook something in all of us. He had always been the anchor, steady and immovable. Seeing him hooked to machines made the air feel thinner. We took shifts at his side. Mom brought crossword puzzles. Dad paced like a general without a mission. I read him the bulletin, even his own porch notes column. He laughed at his jokes. But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, not pain, just the deep weariness of a man who had carried too much for too long. Outside, Brookside kept moving. The potlucks happened without reminders. The Diaz kids ran lemonade stands. Neighbors checked in on each other naturally. It was subtle, but it mattered. The community Grandpa helped shape had become self-sustaining. That was no accident. It was design. Intentional, quiet legacy. One morning, the doctor used the word transition. It hung in the air like smoke. Grandpa waved it off. Don't start mourning before I've gone. But he looked smaller in that bed. Not defeated, just finished. A soldier who had returned home and was finally setting down his rifle. I nodded, fighting tears. He deserved rest. That afternoon, he asked to speak with me alone. Need you more than you think, he said, not because you're smarter. Not because you're stronger, but because you care. That's rarer than it should be. I promised him I'd step up. He didn't say anything, just nodded and closed his eyes for a nap. He passed away 3 days later, peacefully, Mom said. He smiled in his sleep. The funeral was held beneath the oak tree, with the daffodils blooming brighter than usual. No suits, no formal wear. Just neighbors in lawn chairs, kids with sticky fingers, and a flag folded neatly on our porch railing. I spoke at the service, not because I wanted to, but because everyone waited for me to. He wasn't a loud man, I began. But he never needed to be. His presence said everything. I talked about clipboards, lawn chairs, and how he taught us the law mattered only if it respected the people it served. After the service, neighbors came up one by one, sharing stories. Mrs. Chen remembered how he fixed her fence during a thunderstorm. The Diaz family credited him for saving their home from a shady contractor. Even people who once sided with Karen admitted he'd never held it against them. That was grandpaffern, but forgiving. The next bulletin featured a tribute issue. Hold. Photos, memories, porch notes, reprints. I wrote the lead article, The Quiet General. It was raw, but honest. I didn't paint him as perfect, I painted him as present. That's what mattered, presence, not speeches or ceremonies. Just showing up every day. A few weeks later, a motion appeared in the Facebook group, renamed the community center Fitzgerald Hall. That was his last name. The comments section exploded, not with arguments, but stories. People remembered who they became because he had believed in them. That was the vote that passed fastest in Brookside history. I walked through the community center the day after the nameplate went up. Sunlight cut through the windows like golden threads. A kid practiced piano in the corner. 2 seniors played cards. A bulletin board held event flyers, none of them with titles or sponsors, just people doing things together. That's what he built. That summer, I hosted the first Brookside Story Night. No agenda, no minutes, just neighbors telling how they got here, what they hoped for, what scared them. We laughed, cried, clapped. Some people admitted they had once wanted the HOA back. I didn't understand then, one said, now I do. Even Karen's name came up softly, not cruelly. Someone said she reached out, apologizing from afar. She'd joined a mediation group, tried to change, no one cheered. But no one jeered either. That was the new Brookside. Accountability without cruelty. It was healing, slow but steady. Like roots spreading underground. I kept Grandpa's notebook, but I didn't write in it much. Instead, I created a new one, a binder labeled Voices of Brookside. It wasn't about policies, it was about people. What they wanted, what they feared, what they dreamed. No charts, just truth. That became my guide. We faced new challenges, of course. A real estate developer tried to buy the empty lot near the park. Promised upgrades, promised modernization. Sounded familiar. We held a vote. Overwhelming no. We already have what we need, someone said. We just need to take care of it. That was enough. A storm knocked out power one autumn. Night. No one waited for the city. Flashlights appeared. Extension cords snaked from generators. Crock-pots bubbled on front steps. That night, under candlelight, we held an impromptu dinner in the street. Music from Bluetooth speakers. Kids playing flashlight tag. That was resilience. The bulletin added a new section. What Grandpa taught me became a communal column. Every month, someone shared a small lesson. Patience during meetings. Respect when disagreeing.
Yes.
Listening first, talking second. It wasn't worship. It was gratitude. A living memory passed hand to hand. I met someone during all this. Her name was Elise. She moved into the yellow house at the edge of Brookside. She loved dogs, hated cilantro, and read every bulletin before unpacking her boxes.
Your grandpa?
Sounds like someone I wish I'd known, she said. I smiled. You know him more than you think. We started dating. Walks turned into talks. Talks turned into dinners. Elise had ideas, big ones. A community garden, a mentorship circle for teens. I didn't resist. I listened. And eventually I helped. She didn't try to replace Grandpa. She helped expand the world he'd made. That was love. Not possession, but contribution. We built the garden where the old HOA shed once stood. Fitting, right? From rules to roots. Tomatoes, cucumbers, sunflowers, taller than some kids. People brought seeds from family histories. Stories bloomed with the vegetables. These came from my grandmother's backyard in El Salvador. These were from my aunt in Mississippi. In spring, we held the first Brookside Bloom Festival. It's not just flower stories, poems, music, art from kids and grandparents. We buried a time capsule beneath the garden with letters to future residents. We hope you still love fiercely. We hope you still show up. We hope you still remember Grandpa. One night, Elise asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living in his shadow?" I thought for a long time. Not shadow. Shelter. Because his lessons weren't weight, they were roots. I stood taller because he planted deep. Me then. Not because of what I said, but because I believed it. We got engaged beneath the oak tree. The bench had new carvings, ours among them. Daffodils were early that year. I wore Grandpa's old dog tag around my neck. Elise wore his wedding ring on a chain. It wasn't about legacy. It was about continuity. A reminder that love builds, where fear once tried to fence us in. At the wedding, kids read quotes from old porch notes. One said, "Community is how we outlive ourselves." Another said, "It's not about being in charge. It's about being in service." Grandpa's voice echoed across generations, not through microphones, but through memory. That's how he stayed. When our first child was born, we named him Samuel. Sammy for short. He had Grandpa's eyes. We didn't tell him stories right away, just showed him how Brookside worked. Saw neighbors wave, fences get mended, and strangers offered lemonade. That's how we taught him. Through action, through atmosphere. I still visit the oak tree, still sit on the bench. Sometimes with Sammy, sometimes alone, sometimes with Elise. I don't talk much while I'm there. I listen to wind, to birds, to memory. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I hear Grandpa humming. There are no statues of him, no plaques with long biographies. It's just people who do things differently because he once lived here. That's enough. That's more than enough. And it's the kind of legacy you don't measure in words, only in lives touched. So if you ask me what happened to the HOA, nothing. It vanished. Like a bad idea replaced by a better one. What replaced? It, a neighborhood that remembers. A family that shows up. A tree, a bench, and a garden. It's all we ever needed. It started with a rumor, as change often does. Whispers that the city planned to redraw zoning lines. A technical move, bureaucratic even, but it would place Brookside inside a new district. One with very different rules that could reopen the door to HOAs. We didn't panic, but concern grew fast. Meetings were held in kitchens, porches, parks. The bulletin printed what we knew little, but enough to stir memory. "Not again," someone wrote. "We fought once. We can fight again." That spirit returned like a familiar breeze. Elise suggested forming a liaison group, a mix of residents, old and new, to speak at the city council. "This isn't just about paperwork," she said. "It's about identity." We drafted a statement, not angry, just clear. Brookside wasn't a zone, it was a philosophy. The council meeting overflowed. People in Brookside shirts, kids holding signs, no HOA, just heart. Elise read the statement. I followed with a memory of Grandpa. Others added stories. About opposition, but about what we'd built. Not anti-anything, just pro-us. One official smiled and nodded. Another took notes. Third looked unmoved. The motion was tabled, not decided. We returned unsure of the outcome, but proud. Because no one yelled, no one threatened. We showed up with grace. That's what Brookside had taught us. Meanwhile, life continued. Sammy started preschool and made a friend named Leo. Their friendship reminded me of mine with Jorge back in the day. Unlikely, joyful, chaotic. They built forts from cardboard and peace treaties from juice boxes. Pure, unfiltered Brookside spirit. The bulletin ran an issue called Voices for the Future. Kids submitted drawings, poems, dreams. One wrote, "I want to be a neighbor like my dad." Another, "I hope everyone has a garden someday." Sammy drew the oak tree with stars above it, saved every page. One day, Elise came home quiet. "I got a job offer," she said. "Out of state." It was prestigious, learned. It meant moving. Far. "What do we do?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. My heart tightened. Brookside wasn't just where we lived. It was who we'd become. We walked the neighborhood that night, past the community garden, past Fitzgerald Hall, past fences built low on purpose. "Would it be wrong to leave?" she asked. "No," I said, "but it would be hard." We held, hands in silence. The wind carried laughter from somewhere nearby. We called a community circle, no agenda, just transparency. Elise shared the offer. I shared my confusion. No guilt, just truth. The room held us kindly. "You've given us so much," someone said. "We'll support you, whatever you choose." God helped, but didn't solve. Elise and I made a list of what mattered. Family, impact, growth, roots. Brookside checked every box but one: career. The job checked one: opportunity. It felt like a test. No right answer, just values and tension. We slept little that week. In the end, we asked Sammy, "Would you be okay moving?" He looked at us like we asked if the moon was made of soup. "Why would we leave the tree?" he said. Simplicity cuts deepest. We looked at each other and laughed. That night, Elise declined the offer. Not everyone understood. Her parents were disappointed. Some friends called it short-sighted. But Elise didn't flinch. "I'm building something real here," she said. And she was. Brookside wasn't a pause. It was the point. A destination, not a detour. In spring, the city council returned with news. The zoning proposal had been amended. Brookside would retain its status as an independent neighborhood. No forced realignments. No imposed HOAs. The room cheered, but I just exhaled. Not victory-continuity. We held a celebration potluck, not for the council, for ourselves. Lemon bars, barbecue, music from 3 different decades. Jorge's band even played. Sammy and Leo danced like squirrels on caffeine. That night, no one mentioned Karen, not once. Elise and I co-wrote a bulletin piece called "Choosing to Stay." We didn't moralize, just shared our process. "Growth isn't always about going," we wrote. "Sometimes it's about deepening." The feedback flooded in. Some felt seen. Some reconsidered their own moves. The piece struck a chord. One afternoon, Jorge pulled me aside. "You ever think of running for city council?" I laughed so hard I snorted coffee. But he was serious. "We need people like you," he said. "People who listen." I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. But I thought about it. We started mentoring teens. Not formally, just hanging out, listening. Elise led workshops on storytelling. I taught them how to host meetings. Sammy taught them how to build a cardboard rocket. It mattered. More than I expected. They started calling us the Brookside. As time passed. Slowly, then all at once. The tree grew taller. The kids too. Some neighbors moved. Others arrived. But the rhythm stayed steady. New people inherited the culture like old furniture, worn, warm, and necessary. A letter arrived one day from Karen, handwritten. "I heard about Sam," she wrote. "Glad you're keeping him rooted." She shared about her therapy, her regrets, her quiet life in a new town. "I still think about that clipboard," she ended, "and the man who held it." I didn't write back. Not because I hated her, but because silence sometimes says enough. I tucked the letter into Grandpa's notebook, a reminder that people can change, but also that consequences echo, even when the noise fades. We added a new bench near the garden, a plaque read. For all who grew here, not a person, an idea. Growth is legacy. We planted lilacs nearby, Sammy said. "This smells like happiness." I agreed. It did. Elise published her first book, a collection of essays on neighborhood magic. She dedicated it to Grandpa and to Brookside. At her reading, people laughed and cried. One neighbor whispered, "She's passing the torch." I held her hand tight. Sammy started his own column in the bulletin. Kid thoughts. He reviewed lunch menus and rated tree branches for climbing. Pure joy, pure voice. One line read, "Grown-ups forget that fun is important." He wasn't. Wrong. I finally ran for city council, not to fix, just to protect. Elise designed my campaign logo, a tree and a porch swing, simple, honest me. Brookside showed up in droves. We didn't win big, we won right, and that was enough. Brookside became a model. Other neighborhoods visited, asked questions, took notes, but we didn't give them formulas, just stories, just lessons. Trust your people, I said. The rest follows. It's all we ever did. So here we are. Chapter 6 of a story still writing itself. No final battles. Just seasons, shifts, seeds planted long ago, still sprouting, and new hands ready to tend them. That's the Brookside way. If you visit, look for the bench, the oak, the lilacs. Listen for laughter. Maybe join a potluck. You won't find an HOA. But you will find something stronger. Community that remembers. A community that continues.